Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free.
Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paul LaFavor. I'm here with my ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn. Today is Friday, the 27th of January, 2023. Can you believe it? We're this far into January. I think
the years just keep, it seems like they just speed up, you know.
I was just thinking that now that I'm 50, it just seems like it just goes twice as fast, 3 times as fast. It's just crazy.
Yeah. No slowing down. And of course, you know, with everything going on too, it just seems like, you know, it's like, you know, pure entertainment.
There's a lot going on in the world.
Absolutely.
You know, we're coming up on the war in Ukraine. It's almost a full year since Russia's invasion, at least in that sense. And, you know, we've got a lot more people getting involved. A lot of things going on there. We've got China still rattling the saber with Taiwan. And then stuff domestically. A lot of stuff going on there. A lot of stuff found in garages. And then
all over the place.
Yeah, and then some disheartening news, you know, locally in the Fort Bragg area. Just certain stuff that happens. But you know, I think what we wanted to do in today's podcast is talk about something that's important to every warrior, and kind of revisit the warrior virtues and that theme, because we have a book coming out soon, the 5 Warrior Virtues.
What, another book?
Yes, and I think it's timely.
Oh man, well, I mean, this is the whole reason why we're even here.
That's true.
I mean, this is sort of our entire theme is just, you know, building, developing, passing information on to warriors. I mean, this is just a big piece of that.
Yeah, and you know, this is a book that is needed to be written for a long time. It's stuff that I've been just kind of chewing on. Mike and I have been chewing on for a long time. Is the fact that young men are failing. Young men are failing. I would say for the last decade or so. I mean, it's been a sustained attack on manhood. You know, not toxic masculinity. We're talking about biblical masculinity. We're talking about real men, and that goes along with chivalry. Just being a real man. Just been under attack for a long time, and so we wanted to, you know, we'll take a break here and there with podcast, but we wanted to start one on the warrior virtues again. So just that idea that, you know, I ask people that, you know, when we get a new class, I ask them, do you think young men are failing today? You know, I've never had a guy say no. I've never had somebody say, no, we're doing just fine. You know, you know, I always ask guys, okay, these are young Americans. They're coming through the SF pipeline. They want to, you know, win wars for America. And I ask them, how do you think we're doing as a nation as far as, like, you know, masculinity? And they don't think we're doing very well. And that's pretty sad.
Yeah, there's been an assault on the family for, God, I dare say 5 decades.
Yeah.
Maybe longer. But I certainly recall some of the big movements in this country, like in the 1970s particularly. I'm thinking about the whole sort of anything goes, you know, free love society, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole anti-war sort of anti-establishment movement, feminism, and a lot of those movements that at the base of them, I mean, I think we could all look at it and say, yeah, we could do there's some improvements in these areas, but I think now we're looking back at a lot of these big movements and we're realizing exactly what they were, which was pretty much the same thing as BLM is today, Antifa, and a lot of these other so-called movements, and they really have nothing to do with fascism. I mean, for instance, if you take Antifa, right, the anti-fascists, these people could care less about fascism. That's just a front. And I hate to say it, but it's almost looking like I think you could make the argument that feminism had nothing to do with empowering women. And I could go on and on.
No, I think that's.
I think
there was a good part of feminism,
absolutely,
like from the votes for women, 1919, 1920s,
yeah, women's suffrage,
19th Amendment, But the what I agree with you on is the pendulum swung. It just kept swinging, and there were people that hijacked anything good from that, and now it's like anything a man can do, I can do, and not really.
Well, no, I don't even
think
it has anything to do with that. I mean, I honestly, maybe I got a tinfoil hat on, but I honestly think that the people behind a lot of these movements were purposely out to destroy the fabric of American society. And the family, of course, is the building block. I mean, everything comes from the family. I mean, that's the brick, right?
Yeah. I'll even go more tinfoil hatted.
Okay.
It'll be a biblical tinfoil hat, but this is the demonic attack that destroyed the family.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think this is absolutely a spiritual war. I think all this is.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't recognize that, I think as military-minded people that we are, I mean, we did a career in the military. We're always trying to evaluate our enemy. That's just sort of part of our makeup. And so we're always looking, like what's going on here? Let's look behind the curtain. Like what's really happening here? Who is the enemy? What is their intent? Because you can't be successful defending yourself or defeating the enemy unless you understand your enemy. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it is spiritual. I think you have to understand that. If you don't recognize your enemy, he's got you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So young men are failing. Just this idea. So I read quite a few books working on this thesis for the 5 warrior virtues, and that should be coming out hopefully pretty soon. But one of the books that I read that were really so telling, I mean, really just put a microscope over this problem. There's really 2 of them. One, a woman's book, Christina Hoff Sommers, her book, The War Against Boys. So she kind of diagnoses this problem. She looks at young men and why they're failing and, looking at the future of how this is going to go, looking at the trajectory of how we're castrating, boys, young men. And I mean that in a real way, and some literally, but
today, literally.
Yeah, so just the, moral castration of boys, the just kind of taking the role and just kind of, what's that? Gender roles, how men are raised, and just looking at that, she says this, our sons are, these young men who are failing our sons, and they are people with whom our daughters will build a future. If our boys are in trouble, so are we. And so, just looking at the big picture here. And if we look at, and you could argue about when this all started, and we could try to figure that out, but really we know we can kind of diagnose the problem. And one of the saddest things I've heard somebody say lately was somebody I work with, and he said, our warrior class is dying. And he's true. He's absolutely, he's on point with that expression. It's sad. Think about it.
Well, unfortunately, I don't even think it's debatable at this point. Our warrior class generally goes into warrior type professions. Okay, firefighting, law enforcement, the military. I could go on and on. And all of these organizations are seeing a decline in their ability to do their work. Okay, and we're all noticing that. We're noticing problems within law enforcement. We're noticing problems, especially within the military. My goodness. Okay, for those of us that are still very much involved and in touch with the military, it's evident, and people in the military know it as well, and they're concerned about it. And I think most of us are just kind of hoping, well, this is just a phase and we'll get through it. But I'm not really seeing a phase. I'm really seeing a slow sort of decline, and it is troubling.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. A lot of people with brains see this. So here's a big thought here. I took about a year to look at this problem, and I read a lot and kind of digested what a lot of other people have written on this. So just think about this: the way our American values, beliefs, and principles were once passed down to the next generation of men was through really three strands. We could argue that: family, tradition, and then you could say church. Community, right? So I'll say church because I'm a Christian, and that's where I got a lot of my values.
Well, it used to be one and the same.
But you could be at a synagogue, you could be at a Catholic church. I mean, the idea is you're gonna get these values from that faith community, okay? And then largely, probably more than anything else, any other strand would be your family, your father, your mother, how you interact at the dinner table. And
the extended family, right?
Yeah.
Grandparents, right?
Your crazy
uncles,
uncle.
aunts.
Yeah, all that stuff. And then tradition. So let me just kind of lament about one loss of one of the big strands there is tradition. Let's say Boy Scouts. So anyone that hasn't been under a rock for the last 10 years knows what's happened to the Boy Scouts. They're now Scouts for reasons which I believe to help them bail out of bankruptcy was to bring in young girls, women, young ladies, girls into the ranks because the Boy Scouts were failing. So probably that. And so opening the ranks to females obviously has changed, the absolute makeup of the Boy Scouts.
I don't even think
And now it's not Boy Scouts, it's just Scouts.
Yeah, and I don't even think the younger generations even have any familiarity with the way the Scouts used to be.
Yeah.
So for those of us that have been around, at least a little while, we've seen the Scouts really just completely fall apart.
Yes.
I think for the younger generations, I don't think they're like, what are you talking about? I mean, they've always kind of been, But no, there was a day when the Boy Scouts were very much an integral part of the fabric of American life.
Yeah.
When you talk about family and community and church, the Scouts were right there. I mean, one of your parents might have been a Scout leader, certainly was involved. Usually meetings, a lot of times, were held at the community church. This was all sort of part of the fabric of American culture, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what's the beauty of the Boy Scouts was you could be Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, whatever, who cares? I mean, of course I care about that, but the idea is you go to the Boy Scouts, somebody's going to, ostracize you. But the idea is there's an element of that, a spirituality. And, of course, the majority of the Boy Scouts were, of course, Christian. But the first time that I went camping was with the Boy Scouts, not range school, not basic training. First time I had rope in my hands and I was working with knots was not anywhere else but the Scouts. First time I tried to cook grits, and burn myself and start a fire and just all those things and learn how to pack your rucks and all that. I mean, and then the camaraderie and learning from that group of young men in dreaming, about, adventure and all of that, not having a phone in your hand, out in the woods. There's a part of of a young man that needs that, and they're not having it, and they're
Honor.
Yeah.
Scouts honor.
Yeah. So that kind of that segues me into a book that I really liked a lot of what he has to say, and that's Philip Zimbardo. But Zimbardo, in his book Man Interrupted, he co-authored this with Nikita Colombe, and fantastic. I mean, if you don't know who Philip Zimbardo is, he was the one who had that the prison experiment, and he was able to look at, he's a psychologist, from back in the 70s. Anyway, he looks at how the changing norms have affected young men, and how they're opting out of society, and how they're just quitting. They're not engaging with society, and they're getting either bored with it, or they're. And the big thing is this, and it's so telling, is young men are told what they can't do, but they're not given a positive example of what they should do. And so you've got homes where, upwards of 50%, 60%, where there is no father. There's no father figure. There's no male positive role model. And so now they don't even know what that looks like, but all they hear all day is browbeaten about what's toxic masculinity. And it's really, they have no one to look up to, like the Scouts would offer you, like your father would give you, like your uncles, like the older men in the Scout troop, and this, that, and the other. And so he puts his finger on a live nerve and just says, hey, look, this is why our society is going to fail, not just young men, because we're talking about a huge swath of society. They're young men, and these young men are going to grow up. Okay, so the workplace, here's a segue into another thought.
Well, yeah, I mean, but here's the question. I mean, what does it matter?
Oh yeah, well, here's why it matters. Okay, so Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs. He was interviewed, and recently he said that there are about 7 million able-bodied men sitting out of the workforce. So they're just sitting at home. They're in their mother's and father's, their mom's basement, because their father's gone. There's no father, and they're playing Xbox. And they're going to go blind with porn, right? These are the guys, they're not doing, plumbing and electrical work, and they're not doing all these traditional skilled trades. And this is what Mike Rowe says: for every 5 men that leave the workforce, only 2 enter. So 5 men leave, 2 men enter. That's not a good, Thunderdome quote, Just think about that. You do the math. Now, you're just like where we are right now. You have 7 million sitting out. You just do the math every year exponentially. That's going to be more and more. They're going to be living off of EBT, that are not going to be productive members of society. They're not going to find a place where they can find their niche, right? And then you have more people on the government teat. And then, less men are real men. And so you have a weaker society, and then on and on and on. So this is very depressing, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the people that I really like to listen to is a guy by the name of Doug Casey. And he throws articles out there every now and then that I find interesting. And one of the things that he's been doing lately is he's been talking about the parallels between the United States and Rome. And he's been doing these in parts. But
and that's what's scary, that parallel.
Well, I mean, when you read them, you're like, holy smoke, Yeah. So for those of you that like history and have studied some of the rise and fall of Rome, particularly the fall of Rome, I think there's lots of parallels, and Doug Casey's been bringing a lot of those out. But one of it is, kind of, the way Rome was. And Rome was comprised of, relied on its warrior class, right? Its citizens basically landowners, right? Farmers, small farmers. But part of their duty to Rome was to provide their own equipment and serve in the legion. And when Rome was faced with threats from the outside or whatever, okay, people would set down the plow, right, to put the plow away to the side, and the family would do the best carrying on the farm, and they would throw on their gear and go. And towards the end of Rome, that you didn't have that anymore, and that was one of the reasons why. How goes the warrior class is how goes your empire in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't say it any better than Edward Gibbons. Edward Gibbons, if you don't know, he wrote that voluminous work, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Yeah. Now, not a fan of Christianity by any stretch, right, but he did write that the decline of Rome was due to immoderate greatness and excess liberty. Just think about that. Immoderate greatness. I mean, and they got weird. And towards the end of Rome, we do have a lot of jokes about, before the barbarians came in and hacked up all the senators, there were just lasciviousness, madness. And, that's absolutely true. Immoderate greatness and just unchecked licentiousness. But on that same note, so I'm glad you brought that up, is looking back at why Rome fell, right? You had a guy named Vegetius. So Vegetius, he wrote a great volume. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It'll come to me. But he looked back and he said, hey, Rome fell because of its warrior class had diminished. And it was no longer, what it was. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't, it didn't have the principles, the stoutness of heart. And because the warrior class disintegrated, Rome disintegrated. So, here it is. Concerning military matters, guy's name was Publius Vegetius Renatus, so just Vegetius. So his book was called De Re Militari in Latin, but it just means concerning military matters. And then he lamented because he watched Rome deteriorate all around him. He said the decline of eventual fall of Rome was due to the warrior class straying away from its ideals, getting weak, the warrior class dying. So we don't need to chart out a trajectory and wonder where we're going to go as a nation. We can look at the past and say that's where we're going to go, because that's actually what has happened to all the empires before that.
Yeah, Gibbons is famous for a couple things. The other thing is he sort of dates empires.
Yeah.
And he says they're good for about 250 years.
Scary.
Yeah, you can do the math.
Yeah, we're at 247 coming up this July. Yeah, let's hope he's wrong on that one. But yeah, so Vegetius, he said this was his big argument. The warrior class maintains the safety, security, and survival of the state. Or you could say it this way: hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. So I think we all see. I think we all see
that's where we're at.
That we're in hard times, and it's time. If you follow this little limerick, is hard times need to create strong men. So it's time for hard men to rise up and give this nation a backbone again. And even if people don't appreciate it,
well, and they won't.
And
the reason,
and they'll call it toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and the reason they won't is because the soy boys are running everything, and listen,
that's what's in vogue.
It's and
because they're safe.
Hey,
soy boys are safe.
Hey, listen, man, it's a great gig. Okay, you hang around, you're making big money off the hard work of everybody else. But things just get so ate up that eventually the warrior class has got to be like, hey, man, you're going to have to get out of the way, okay? Because, I mean, this thing is, the ship's going down, and you're going to have to move out of the way. And they're not going to just they're not just going to get out of the way. They're not just going to hand you the wheel. But the warrior class is going to have to take it, because otherwise, we're going to hit the iceberg. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. So because we like to use the Bible.
Yeah, there we go.
I love... every time we talk about stuff like this, my mind goes back to an episode in the Word of God where you have one of the last judges during the judge period before Saul and David was Eli. And famously, Eli had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were also priests and were just any wayward priests, right? Terrible. But the Bible actually calls them worthless males. Worthless males. And it actually says that they didn't listen to their father because God had determined to put them to death. God was determined. They went so far that God just said, I'm just taking them out. And I'm going to do my people good by slaying them. And they did. That's the idea, is they were worthless male. And what they did is they had a position of authority, and they were priests, and so they were a position of trust, a position of leadership, a position of authority, and what they did is they used it to ingratiate themselves. Yeah. And they stole from the people's offerings. They had sex with women who were going to worship at the tabernacle. And you just look at this. These guys were thinking with their little heads, and they're thinking with their bellies. And just these guys were prime targets for destruction.
Yeah, the entire structure now, I think you could argue, is occupied by Hophni and Phinehas, right? Phinehas.
Yeah. And the reason why, here's the big thing too, and you know this, an unnamed prophet came and rebuked Eli because he did not restrain his sons.
His boys, yeah.
And he did not. And the reason why his sons were slaughtered, and I bring this up usually on a Father's Day message, is because Eli failed his sons. He was the father who failed his sons, and he basically let them be destroyed because he would not restrain them. Now, of course, they own their sin, and they were rightfully destroyed themselves. But what a message to what can happen to a culture, a society. And because you look what happened to Israel at this point, they thought that the Ark of the Covenant, when they were going out to fight the Philistines, was going to be like a lucky talisman for them. And you can just visualize Hophni and Phinehas standing real close to it, thinking that would protect them. And they were, of course, hacked up, in sight of the Ark. And then the Ark spent some time in the Philistine lands. And it just showed, hey, look, look at what worthless men can do if they're at the helm. And that's just a fitting argument.
Yeah, we're watching that right now. I mean, we're all witnessing that right now.
And if you look at this, we have, you've got whole generation. I mean, I hate to say this, sounds terrible, like a generation of worthless males. Right now, before we've said generation, X, and I think I'm Generation X. I'm not sure. I was born in 1972.
Yeah.
So whatever that is, somebody decides what these are, but this is generation. I mean, you can be mean, but there's just so many worthless males. We can come up with a name. It may not be good.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is,
but that is not doesn't mean that we can't turn this around.
No. I mean,
it could be a ship correction.
I don't think. Well, I'm not.
That's why we exist.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're not trying. We don't expect to turn the entire male population of the world around. I mean, that's unrealistic. But there's a few people. There's always a remnant. There's always a remnant of men, and you're not alone. And stay strong. Yeah. And you may have, you may not have been brought up in the perfect, ideal father, mother, or, going to church every Sunday sort of environment with a strong community and all that. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to figure out what works. And if it's not, if what you see around you right now isn't working, then you need to go, you need to go back to truths, right? I mean, our historical truths. There's things that work, and we know they work. And right now, I mean, I look at society. I mean, okay, we bought into all this nonsense, and this is what it's gotten us. And quite frankly, I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
Are you?
No. Yeah. So we talked about attacking the family. So just think about it. In this death spiral that we're in with an attack on men. Just some stats here. From the 60s to the 90s, the percentage of children living apart from their biological father was 36%, 60s and 90s. And it had been 17% in the 50s. Yeah. And today, it's estimated that half of all young men grow up without a father.
Hey, you don't need a father.
Yeah, it's just shown.
Right? I mean, you can
just watch the sitcoms.
Yeah, you don't need a father. I mean, they're a buffoon anyway.
Yeah, just another kid.
As long as Uncle Sugar's sending you a check every month, you're good, right? I mean, why do you need a father? Why do you need a mom and a dad freaking, struggling, working hard? You don't need that. We've replaced the father. The father's been replaced, and it's evident in everything.
Think about of course, that's what we're hearing, but think about this. Think about some other stats. 60% of violent rapists did not have a father at the home. 60%.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
75% of adolescents who commit homicides came from fatherless homes.
Yeah, no father.
75%. And then statistics show that children without fathers are 3 times more likely to drop out of school. 3 times.
Yeah, I believe that.
So you have you don't have a stability, you don't have discipline, you don't have role model. Then you can talk about drugs. You can talk about teenage pregnancies. Just add in all these other depressing stats.
Well, I mean, I'm going to get in trouble here, but in any 2-parent home, there's things that mom provide and there's things that dad provide. And, I certainly, in my house, don't do a very good job when I'm trying to provide what my wife provides, okay?
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how hard I try, okay?
It's meant to be a team.
It's meant to be a team, and I'm going to tell you right now, even with the team, Paul, and you know this, it's difficult, okay?
Yeah.
2-parent homes are still challenging, okay? Kids are challenging. They're, especially in today's society. I cannot imagine trying to do this as a single parent.
Yeah.
And my hat's off to them, okay? But it's not the ideal. And unfortunately, if you're not, let's say you find yourself in that situation. I certainly grew up in that situation. But at least back in our day, I think we had strong communities and went to church. I mean, I had, a coach that would put his boot in my butt whenever I needed it. Still had corporal punishment at schools, okay? And trust me, I was in there getting paddled probably once a week, okay? But everybody was in your backside, making sure that you were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, there was certainly no lack of male role models in my life, okay? I had plenty of them, and they were all telling me how it was supposed to be. But today, I think, if you're a single parent, especially a single mother, okay, I got a neighbor that's a single father. He just lost his wife, and he's struggling as well. Okay, but for the single mothers out there, you really have to work overtime to try to figure out where you're going to get the male role models from. Do you get them involved in sports, whatever you got to do, but you got to really look hard to make sure, maybe grandpa, whatever, but uncle. Okay, but you really got to work hard to make sure that your kids are getting that. And fathers are important to daughters, probably even more so than they are for sons.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned these 3 strands of our culture that kind of held everything together and was able to produce able-bodied young men that could be citizens, able-bodied citizens and warriors. And, I said family, church, and school. I remember getting spanked at all three of those locations. The only place I didn't get spanked at was like the Boy Scouts, but at church, school, I got paddled there too.
Unless you acted up at the scout meeting. And then
Sure.
You got it when you got home.
Yeah, and then, of course, you would be pulled off to the side and, verbally disciplined. Right. But, yeah, I think part of something I've seen, I haven't articulated it before, but just people opting out. Yeah. Opting out of the lives of young men because, well, I can get in trouble. Whatever. Maybe it's not culturally accepted anymore. As an older man at school, or let's say an older man at church, and you see somebody acting up, we still do that. We go, hey, don't do that. They're not your kids, but you have a responsibility as an adult to say something like, hey, don't run out into the road. Now, people, I think, would still do that. But, like, to try to reel in some kids that are acting unruly,
there is
less and less.
I'm so glad you brought that up. The judicial branch has not done us service. You're right. People are just scared of getting sued.
Yeah.
Losing their job, being ostracized. And we're talking about people that have good intentions, good Samaritans, just trying to do the right thing. But it's almost scary now. People are like, no, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to intervene here.
Yeah, not just I'm not going to, like I said, I got my backside warmed up at school, church, everywhere. But not even that, I'm not even going to say anything because I could be called a racist or I could be called whatever, a bigot, and I can be even defriended on Facebook or whatever, man. So you have whatever, man, then lose your job. And so that's culturally, we're going to have to fix that. Maybe it can start with just strong communities that are, recovering. And this is what we've been talking about the whole time is how do we stop from hitting the iceberg is we return to first principles.
Exactly.
We return to what is that works, return back to the foundation. We're talking about biblical foundations and that is the only thing that's going to keep us from the giant train wreck. Now, a lot of people are going to we're going to have a front row seat for the others in the train wreck. But
there's absolutely a battle going on right now, and it is this sort of, and I think it's a spiritual battle, but I think it's the forces of tyranny and despotism, globalism, one world government, new world order. You can call it whatever you want. I don't care. But and then there's the other forces, which are localization, liberty, freedom, patriotism, family, community, and I think those are the two forces going on right now, and I think you see it everywhere. So we certainly advocate the latter, which is sort of disengaging from a failed, bloated system that's just not working. And getting back to first principles, getting back to family, getting back to community, getting back to the basics that work, that we know work.
Yeah, I say it this way. We have too many people that just don't give a crap. Yeah. Too many people that just say, whatever, man, this thing's going down. And
it probably is.
Yeah,
but
I can't police up everybody. But
I think, and I think there's, I think there's some validity to that argument, but that doesn't mean you give up and you just drown. I mean, I think what that means is you got to get busy, because I think it's difficult to return back to a more simple life that we're supposed to have. I think returning to our roots is difficult, because I think it's very easy to get kind of caught up in everything.
We've talked about this a lot before, Mike, is, now you could, right, wrong, or indifferent, but my grandmother's grandfather, William Thomas Wade, he was from Richmond County. He fought for the Confederacy. He was a slave owner. So you got to own your history. But one thing he was Tar Heel, and that was his identity. He was also an American, but that all those, the whole idea is not to go open a big ball of wax of history. We could go anywhere with that, what I just said. But the idea is he identified as, if I can say that, as a Tar Heel.
Yeah.
Someone was from Tennessee, Kentucky, New York, whatever. That was their identity. And I think at some point, we've just gotten too big with, I'm a citizen of the world, and I'm this, that, and the other. It's like, how about I live in this county? And I concern myself with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the dumbing down, if you will, of Americans, because I think Americans are taught that every culture is the same and equal, and that's just nonsense. And I can use anything. I mean, recently, a lot of people have a lot of familiarity with Afghanistan. We've got a lot of people that have served recently there. But one of the things that you'll find in Afghanistan culture is, the dancing boys. Well, I'm sorry, but that's incompatible with Western civilization. We don't do that here. Yeah. And there's a million other things I could bring up, but not all cultures are equal. And there's something to be said. We don't poop in the street. Yeah. So you have to recognize that, and I think it's ridiculous that we have to all somehow put everything's the same, everything's good. And no, it's not. You have to have some discernment. You have to understand what works and what doesn't work, and what is and what isn't. And our culture is not compatible with a lot of other cultures. Now, they can do what they want over there. I could care less. I mean, I'm not into running Afghanistan anymore. I am interested in running Ukraine. But your backyard, your community.
I'm with you.
We have our standards, and we should be able to live within those standards and raise our children within those standards.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. So something I've lamented about for a while is I'm working on Masters of Clinical Mental Health. I've had to read a lot of the poison that has created a lot of this craziness that we have seen of late, the wokeness and the nonsense. And I've read all that poison. But one thing that I remember that just really irked me, it just really chapped my butt, is how other cultures are like venerated, whatever, Latino, Asian, whatever. And they're like, oh, that's how the father and the mother operate, and that's like accepted, and you should respect that as a counselor. But your culture, American culture, it's just bigoted, and you're just wrong. And I always just wanted to take a flamethrower to all those ideas because it does matter. That is our culture. We were raised that way. The way we were brought up is correct. And I would say from the Bible Belt, okay, here in the South, we were raised with a biblical foundation. And I would say, I would also look at these other states that are going berserk. They don't have that. So, not to just crap on your state, wherever you're at, but my whole point is this. We have a culture, at least in the South, where it's a biblical foundation. You have, and it does matter, and that needs to be protected also. The biblical foundation for the family, the roles. There's roles for men, roles for women, and I think people can attack that and say whatever they want, but we got to stick to our guns. And I think one of the things that's kept our country from going even more out of control is because of the Bible Belt and because of the stability of the Christian family that we have. And that's my argument. If you look at this whole, this kind of a little bit of a diatribe here, but really, that is a first principle. I mean, our country was founded on that, the nuclear family. Having a father and a mother and then children as God bless that family. And if we don't want to say, well, that's just, other cultures are okay and we'll venerate that, but ours, forget yours. It can just be whatever you want. Well, it can be something else, but it's not going to work. And those families are not going to survive. And so I'm just going back to what I always say. If we do things God's way, we get God's results. And that is a result that works. That is the formula, as you said. That's the first principle. That's the foundation. And you can't expect to build, without good materials. So, man, I had to get that off my chest.
No, I mean, I think it's a valid point. I mean, it's like, why are we venerating cultures that haven't accomplished anywhere near what we've accomplished?
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes we forget that. I mean, the fact that we exist, the world is better. I mean, I'm sorry I got to break that out, but I mean, the amount of,
go there.
the technology and everything else that we've done. I mean,
The reason why people aren't goose stepping.
I mean, there's a reason why people are flowing across the border from all over the world. Okay, it's not because this place is evil. Okay, it's because they want to make a better life for themselves. I mean, I would be doing the same thing. Okay, I'm not an open borders guy because I think that's ridiculous. You don't have a country if you don't have borders. But I understand why they're coming, and I'd want to come here too. And it's not because we have a substandard culture. We have freedom here. We have ideals. We have principles, and people are flocking to that. They understand that there's prosperity and happiness that comes with that. So yeah, I think we need to be proud of who we are, be proud of what we believe in, understand, what's made us great, and return back to those truths.
Yeah, and that, I can speak for myself and my family. It has worked. I've been married 27 years. I have 2 grown daughters. I got a granddaughter. We've been doing this way. We've been following the biblical principles for marriage. It actually works. It actually does work. It's not just an abstract. I've lived it out. And when you do it that way, I've noticed. The big teaching on this is called, and this is, we're good ways from where we started, but this is also in this is, biblical manhood and biblical womanhood, and the biblical manhood is not asserting itself to be served. But what a biblical manhood does is it exists to serve. Men serve. We're servants to society. We're servants to our family. We're servant leaders. And that's something that you're not going to hear on CNN, that a father and a husband is a servant leader of his family. He would give his life for his family. He works for his family. I mean, and that's, when you look at it that way, what woman doesn't want to submit to a man who would die for her? Who would do whatever he can for his children? It just falls in line. And when your wife acts like, that way and submits to your servant leadership, it's like it's a holy thing. It's a beautiful thing, and you don't want to wrong that. And when I saw that, over our first 7 years of our marriage was not that, but it became that. It got fixed. We did it God's way. We found out, hey, this works. And we're like, wow, this is amazing.
You're probably a lot like me, which is like every day I'm, trying to get better, okay, at being living up to what I'm supposed to live up to.
Of course. You don't arrive.
You never arrive. You're always working on it. You're always checking yourself, and going back to the book, trying to figure out where the answers are, and like, should I have handled that differently? What's the best way to do this?
Another man thing, have an accountability part.
Yeah,
somebody go, hey man, you kind of
it's just constantly not being comfortable where you're at. You're always improving on your position, right? You're always improving yourself. Yeah. So I think some people sometimes get the wrong idea of that, self-righteous, Christian guy or something. That's probably the farthest from the truth. I mean, I think if anything, it humbles you, and you realize that there's you have an entire family that's depending on you, and you have a lot of responsibility, and you got to keep working at it, which I want to kind of get to where we kind of started, which is our concern, of course, is the the status of warriors in this country, the status of warriors within the family, and I think what you've done, Paul, which I really like, is again you've taken something that can be pretty complicated and a lot of material, and you've really condensed it down into 5 virtues. 5 things that you found are uniform throughout the history of the warrior, and things that we need to, as men, need to focus on. And so let's get to, because I'm pretty excited about this book.
Yeah.
Let's introduce the 5 warrior virtues and what they are and talk about them.
Okay, yeah, sure. So as you said, if you look at all history, and I'm looking at history, I'm talking about codes, warrior codes, poetry, ballads, and these are through the centuries, through various countries, Asiatic, European, African, South America, whatever, North American, and they have basically the same 10 to 12 or so virtues, but when you kind of collapse the sector on this, there's really 5. There's really 5 that exist from ancient to modern. 5 virtues. Those are honor, integrity, loyalty, temperance, and courage. Those 5. Now, the temperance, not everyone is familiar with that one. You probably, no doubt, everyone's heard of the other 4. But temperance is just self-control. It's moderation, self-control, it's self-restraint. It's kind of all of those. But the 5 warrior virtues, a concentration of those really will give us, that is really essentially a return to the first principles. Return to, what's not being talked about a lot. So just like the first virtue, honor. A lot of people have heard that word is used, but not a lot of people know what it means. What is honor? And also integrity, same thing. A lot of people use that, but it's like, okay, what does that really mean? And loyalty and so on. But maybe we have enough time for maybe we can talk about the first virtue a little bit.
Which for you is honor.
Yeah, so honor. So honor is, now I look at this, I've looked at as far back as, let's say, Rome, Greece, even before Rome, the Greeks, Spartans. And I would say the farthest back would be the Iliad, which is probably about 800 BC. So you're talking Homer's Iliad, and that word, honor, just jumps off the page. You're not going to be able to read much of it without seeing that word. And honor is used as a verb and is used as a noun. So you could say honor is essentially a quality that's difficult to describe but easily recognized. So we know something's honorable when we see it, and we know that something's dishonorable when we see it too. But honor is almost like a warrior's currency. So honor can redeem something that's bad. It can redeem something bad with honor. Honor is also a prize to be won. So it's a goal out there. Sometimes just out there, just floating, this abstract idea. But then you can honor someone personally through a deed, through words, acknowledgement. Of course, probably the best example we have is the Congressional Medal of Honor, when we, put that around someone's neck, and then the honor that comes with that. But so honor can be exchanged, it's received. And so just let me give you a little story here. So I looked at this, how honor can be exchanged and how it's a prize. And really that's what honor means in the Greek language, time. And you see that word time all over the Iliad. That's what Achilles was after. That's what the Greeks were after, honor. All of them were, of course, Achilles was after personal honor. It's
Right.
not so much of a national value, but so honor means a valuation of worth. It means you're worthy. You have a lot of value, personally. And so you can understand that when you say, if something lacks honor, you can just say there's no honor in it. There's no honor in that. Killing some old man who's defenseless. There's no honor in that. So here's a story. Admiral Michael Borda. Admiral Michael Borda, he was the chief of naval operations, 40 years, the top of his game. He was previously, he was the chief of naval operations, top of his game, but back in the Vietnam War, he was on float, so he was on a carrier. And so he had 2 combat pins, which were the Vietnam era ribbons that he wore. And he had 2 combat pins that went on that Vietnam era ribbon. And there were some allegations made against him that he wasn't authorized to wear those combat pins. And I can't remember who it was, but it got to such a point that Borda decided to take the drastic step of firing a bullet into his chest. In fact, where those combat pins were. And he took his own life because of that. And now, as I see him as an honorable man, albeit, he made a huge mistake of taking his own life. And so it was a noble thing he did, but although misguided.
Was it courageous?
Yeah. I mean, it was courageous. He did this, he said in a suicide note, to defend the honor of the Navy. And that's what he thought was slighted. So he didn't think about himself.
It wasn't.
This is an amazing thing.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago when
I want to defend that.
We would duel. We would have duels in this
Absolutely.
country if somebody, challenged your honor, dishonored you, or you felt dishonored. It was nothing to, let's go out and there was rules to dueling. I mean, these were, they weren't like barroom brawls by no means. I mean, a lot of times you had to have somebody come out there. I can't remember the second or whatever they called it.
You had to have a second, yeah.
Weapons were chosen and there was rules to it, but it was serious.
Yeah.
It was a life or death event.
Honor was about life
Usually.
or death.
I mean, not always. I mean, sometimes people escaped them, but and the reason why I say that is because Winston Churchill, I think we've talked about this. Which one is what's the most powerful? What's the most important virtue? And I agree. Honor is clearly. I don't think one could argue that honor is obviously important, and because a lot of times it has to do with life or death for people. But courage, Winston Churchill liked courage the best. He thought courage was the biggest because he thought all other virtues relied on it.
Well, courage is the testing point for all virtues.
Yeah. So it's certainly important as well. I mean, these things are not, you can't just discount them. They all come to play.
And I put it this way. I put honor, if there are just 5 warrior virtues, as I'm saying, at least 5. There's at least 5. There's others, but
there's a whole bunch of virtue. But I think
I would say that honor
is the big 5 for sure.
If you say 5, the virtues are your fingers.
Yes.
I'm going to say that honor is your thumb. Because if you don't have honor, you're not holding anything. It's not, you're nothing. If you don't have honor, even if you're courageous,
you made a point.
Nothing.
You made a point which I thought was interesting. You said if it's honorable or dishonorable.
Yeah,
it's something you know.
Yeah,
and I think maybe not, because I think honor also has to have some underpinnings. I mean, I think you honestly have to know right and wrong.
That's why I'm saying is that honor has a moral component.
There is a moral component. I think that's like maybe the most important component of it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be grounded in that, right?
Yeah, well, that's why here's at the foundational level. I'm saying that it's a virtue. A virtue is a praiseworthy excellence. So that's why some people would say,
Praiseworthy.
yeah. So they would say, why would honor be a virtue? Why would that be? It is because it's a quality that I ascribe to an action. So it could be not necessarily a courageous action. It probably goes hand in hand with something, and it usually does.
Yeah, I think they are very closely tied.
Yeah, the Medal of Honor recipients. I mean, they're all
courageous individuals,
yeah.
right?
But see, with courage, you have a mental courage, and then you have a moral courage too. Mm-hmm. So you have willingness to sacrifice yourself, but then you also have a moral courage where you're willing to sacrifice your job, not necessarily your existence.
Sure.
So this is very essential. My point is, honor is that quality that is bigger than yourself. It's just bigger than yourself. That's why I like to pick Admiral Borda. In his suicide note, he said it was for the honor of the Navy that he did that. He didn't want to stain the honor, integrity of the Navy. That's why he killed himself, which was terrible and misguided. But I understand, his thought process.
I respect his decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. He's definitely a man. He was definitely a warrior, and he made a decision.
Yeah,
and there'd be all kinds of people, of course, that would be like, "Oh, that was ridiculous," and for all the reasons why they would give, but it's because they probably don't understand warrior virtues.
Yeah, I mean, and I say honor is at the ground floor. So as we go off into this discussion, as we, we're going to wrap this up, but when we do the next ones, I mean, really everything builds on honor. If you don't have honor, you can have as much courage as you want. If it's not done honorably, then it's done wrong. It is be done for the wrong reasons.
Are we instilling that today in these? So the other question is,
we don't take time to do it. We just assume that everyone knows it.
Are young warriors still seeking honor?
Yeah.
Today, maybe more than ever. Not quite sure where. Is it elusive?
Yeah, that's really now that is also a great argument, and Carl Jung made that argument that there was a subset of a hero archetype. It was a warrior, and warriors really they have a sense that they needed to defend their family and their kindred and their kind, and so they're the ones who run to the sound of the guns. They're the ones that feel the need to take up arms to defend our values and our liberties and our life. And so, they are the ones that have a need for honor. I mean, honor is for them everything. If they don't have honor, then they have no life. And so that's why it's so important.
And that's what we're about.
Yeah.
This program is for those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those individuals.
And the idea is when you're around, when you can sense honor, also has a spiritual component, and when it's done right, and you sense it in your soul that it's done right, and you're there and you're witnessing it, and wow, that is honorable, and it's something that's sacred. That's what's the quality of it.
Well, I think we've laid a pretty good foundation today, at least we talked about where we think we're at right now. Some of the problems, why we are where we are. We've talked a little bit about the state of the masculinity and the state of our warrior class and where we think they need to go. And I think we've touched on the first virtue, introduced it, honor, and then I think we have a good starting pad, if you will, to really kind of get into this in our next episode.
Right on.
All right, Paul, I appreciate it today.
Yeah, man.
Great conversation. I'm glad you're writing this book. I think it's going to be, again, something that's definitely timely and needed more than ever. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our unique content, please consider supporting our sponsors. SOF News, providing special operations news from around the world. It's where Paul and I go to keep abreast of what's going on within the SOF community. Check them out at sof.news. Blacksmith Publishing, been serving the warrior class since 2013. They have great titles written for warriors by warriors. If you're looking for excellent reference material or just want to unwind with a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore located at blacksmithpublishing.com. And if you're looking for some cool Pinelander apparel, head on over to the general store located at pinelandergeneralstore.com. That's all one word, pinelandergeneralstore.com. Have a great selection of shirts, hats, jackets, sweaters, stickers, patches, artwork, and a whole lot more. Check out the store at pinelandergeneralstore.com. If you're interested in helping develop our country's next generation of warriors, please consider donating to the American Agoge Project. The mission of the project is to foster an environment producing able-bodied citizen warrior men of fine character. And we'll be officially launching the project in 2023 in celebration of Blacksmith Publishing's 10th anniversary. Until our next meeting, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. To each other we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. May God continue to bless Pineland.